A frigid morning in the heart of Moscow, mid-February, 1978. Kurilov stood at the window in his sixth-floor office, inside a gray building with no nameplate, gazing down at the snow-covered city below. Cigarette smoke rose in a thin ribbon toward the ceiling, leaving a bitter aftertaste in his mouth. "Why the hell are they shipping us to the edge of nowhere?" he muttered, not expecting an answer. Behind him in the office, 4 operatives were preparing for departure. Each one was a top-tier professional, but even they felt the unnatural tension hanging thick in the air. Krasnoyarsk territory, northern sector. Serov's voice echoed dully in the silence of the office. The area's been closed to civilians. Last intel we got from there came in 6 months ago. Then communications went dark. 2 research expeditions vanished without a trace. Local hunters are reporting bizarre animal behavior, and satellite imaging has picked up a settlement that doesn't exist on any map. Kurilov crushed his cigarette and turned toward the others. His partner Zakharov caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. He sensed trouble too. "And what exactly are we looking for out there?" Zakharov asked, reflexively adjusting his holster. Serov shook his head. "On paper, it's terrain reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, but through unofficial channels." He paused. "The last transmission from the region mentioned some kind of anomalies. Command suspects either illegal operations or, well, something else entirely." The team also included 2 others, Ivanov, young but already seasoned, and Medvedev, a taciturn veteran everyone respected for keeping his cool in the toughest situations. 2 days later, an Mi-8 helicopter was ferrying them across the endless taiga. The cargo hold was freezing despite the heater running. Kurilov stared out the porthole. Below, a white ocean of forest stretched to the horizon, occasionally cut by dark ribbons of frozen rivers. Not a single trace of human presence anywhere. "Wild country out here," the pilot said, without turning around. "I'm dropping you 10 clicks from the target coordinates. Can't risk going any closer. Forest's too dense. I'll pick you up in 3 days at the same clearing. If things go sideways, you've got the emergency beacon." Kurilov glanced at his comrades. Everyone was silent, lost in their own thoughts. Even Serov, usually calm and composed, was clearly on edge. His fingers gripped the map just a little too tightly. The helicopter began its descent, and soon they spotted a small gap among the trees. The aircraft hovered above it, whipping up swirls of snow. The team quickly unloaded, hunching beneath the rotating blades. The Mi-8 immediately lifted off, leaving them alone in the middle of the silent taiga. "We move out," Serov commanded curtly, adjusting his pack straps. "We need to cover at least half the distance before nightfall." They fell into single file, marching through knee-deep snow. Cold seeped through their gear, despite the thermal uniforms. The forest around them stood unnaturally quiet. No birds, no animals, just the crunch of snow underfoot and the heavy breathing of men. Toward midday, snow began to fall. Large flakes drifted slowly down between the trees. Kurilov walked at the rear, carefully scanning the forest on both sides. "Something's off with my compass," Zakharov said in a low voice, stopping short. "The needle's jumping around like crazy." Serov walked over to him and pulled out his own compass. It was behaving just as strangely. The needle twitched as if it couldn't determine which way was north. "Magnetic anomaly," Ivanov suggested. "Maybe. But the direction's still right. Keep moving." Kurilov noticed Medvedev shaking his head. The old wolf clearly doubted the direction, but he said nothing. He never spoke without good reason, and his silence now felt especially ominous. By afternoon, The snowfall intensified. Visibility dropped to just a few meters, and the team was forced to stay close together to avoid getting separated. The forest around them changed. The trees grew taller, their canopies closing overhead, creating an oppressive sense of enclosed space. "Break time," Seraph commanded when they reached a small clearing. "We'll check coordinates and grab some food." The group settled under a sprawling spruce tree, pulling out thermoses of hot tea and canned rations. They ate in silence, each man lost in his thoughts. Kurilov pulled out his cigarettes and lit one, shielding the flame from the snow with his palm. "Strange," Ivanov suddenly said, staring off between the trees. "You guys notice? Not a single track in the snow, no animals, no birds. Like everything living just left." The others exchanged glances. Ivanov was right. The forest was lifeless. Even the howl of wind through the branches sounded somehow wrong, as if someone were carefully imitating the sound. Zakharov reached for his radio. "Let me check in with base." All that came through the speaker was static. He adjusted the settings. No use. Just white noise and occasional clicks, more like Morse code than interference. "They're jamming us." Kurilov looked at Seraph. "Who out here could be jamming signals?" Seraph frowned. "Nearest settlement is over 100 kilometers away." Medvedev suddenly raised his hand, signaling everyone to be quiet. His face tensed. He was peering into the forest thicket. They all froze. Through the wind's noise came another sound, either the creaking of an old tree or something else entirely. "Wolves?" Ivanov whispered. "No." Medvedev shook his head. "Something different." The sound repeated. Kurilov's hand moved to his holster. Something was moving in the forest, slowly, carefully, but it seemed to be approaching them, and it definitely wasn't an animal. Too methodical. Too deliberate. "We're leaving," Seraph said, tersely. Fast but quiet. The team quickly gathered their gear and moved on. The sound faded, but the feeling of being watched didn't disappear. Kurilov kept looking back, but all he saw were branches swaying in the wind and falling snow. Yet he could have sworn someone was observing them. The snowfall grew heavier toward evening. The white curtain between trees became denser, and now even Serav's silhouette ahead looked blurred. Kurilov felt his fingers going numb despite his warm gloves. Time seemed to stand still. They'd been walking for hours, but the forest around them never changed. "Hold up!" Seraph suddenly commanded sharply. "Something doesn't add up." He unfolded the map, though in the gathering dusk it was already difficult to make anything out. "We should have reached the river by now." Seraph traced his finger across the map. "It cuts through this entire grid square, but there's no river." "Maybe we got off course," Zakharov suggested, though his voice carried doubt. "Impossible. I've been tracking our heading. We've followed the route exactly." Ivanov grabbed Kurilov by the sleeve. "Look." In the falling snow, maybe 50 meters away between the trees, a small light flickered. Faint, yellowish, like the glow of a kerosene lamp in a window. The team froze. The light appeared and disappeared, as if someone were walking through a room with a lamp. "Someone's living out here," Ivanov whispered. "There's nothing here," Seraph said, consulting his map. "There can't be any dwelling here." But he hesitated. "That's where we need to go anyway." Kurilov felt a chill run down his spine. Something was fundamentally wrong about that light, about this place, about this entire situation. But they had no choice. Orders were orders. The team moved toward the light, trying to move as silently as possible on the deep snow. The closer they got, the clearer the outline of a cabin became. Old but solid, with small windows. Smoke rose from the chimney, dissolving into the falling snow. Serov gestured for them to spread out. Kurilov and Zakharov took the left flank. Medvedev and Ivanov took the right. They slowly approached the cabin, weapons at the ready. "Something's wrong," Zakharov whispered. Kurilov realized he'd noticed it too. Around the cabin there were no tracks, no paths, no footprints, just pristine snow, as if the house had simply materialized in the middle of the forest. Suddenly the cabin door opened. An old man appeared on the threshold, tall, gaunt, with a long gray beard. He looked straight at them, though in such darkness and snowfall, he simply couldn't see them. "Come in, soldiers." His voice rang out, unexpectedly youthful. "Why are you standing out in the cold?" How did the old man know they were military? Serov slowly emerged from behind a tree, hand on his holster. "Who are you?" he asked harshly. "What are you doing here?" The old man chuckled. "I live here, and you're looking for something, aren't you?" He paused. "Well then, come inside. We'll talk." Inside the cabin, it was warm and dry. The old man seated them at a large wooden table and lit another kerosene lamp. In its light, Kurilov examined the room. An ordinary taiga cabin, except the icons in the corner looked strange, as if written backwards. "Some tea?" the old man asked, and without waiting for an answer, placed a sooty kettle on the stove. "You live here alone?" Serov tried to sound calm, but Kurilov saw how tense his shoulders were. "Alone?" The old man chuckled. "No, not alone. There's a village nearby. That's what you're looking for, isn't it?" He paused. The old man knew far too much for a random hermit. "The village is an hour's walk from here," he continued. "But I wouldn't recommend going there at night. The forest doesn't take kindly to strangers after dark." "What village?" Serov pulled out the map. "There's nothing marked here." The old man poured tea into chipped mugs. "Not everything makes it onto maps, soldier. Especially not what's been here since before your maps existed." Kurilov sipped the tea. It was strong, with a bitter herbal taste. "We're looking for 2 research expeditions. Have you seen anyone pass through here?" The old man's eyes grew distant. "Many pass through here. Few leave." He fell silent, then added, "Your people. Scientists, were they? They came about 6 months back, went to the village, never came back out." "What do you mean, never came back?" Ivanov leaned forward. "The village, it has a way of keeping people. Those who enter become part of it. It's been this way for a very long time." Serov stood up abruptly. "We're leaving." "As you wish," the old man said calmly. "But the night's already here, and the forest at night." He didn't finish, just shook his head meaningfully. The team filed out of the cabin. The snowfall had stopped, but darkness had fallen completely. Only their flashlight beams cut through the black void between trees. "What the hell was that?" Zakharov muttered. "Some kind of crazy hermit?" "Maybe," Serov said, but didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe he's trying to scare us away from something. Either way, we keep moving. We need to find that village." They walked for about an hour when Medvedev suddenly stopped. "Listen." In the silence of the night forest, a new sound emerged. Rhythmic, like dozens of feet moving in unison, and it was getting closer. "Defensive positions," Serov commanded quietly. They took cover behind trees, weapons drawn. The sound grew louder, and then, between the trees, figures began to appear. People, or something that looked like people. They moved strangely, their gait unnatural, as if their joints bent in the wrong places. Identify yourselves, Seraph called out. The figures stopped. In the flashlight beams, Kurilov saw their faces, expressionless, with wide frozen smiles that stretched far beyond what should be humanly possible. Their eyes reflected light like an animal's. "We've been waiting for you," one of them said, in a voice that sounded like it came from underwater. "Welcome home." They began moving forward again. Seraph fired a warning shot into the air. The figures didn't even flinch. "Run!" Seraph shouted. They bolted through the forest, flashlight beams swinging wildly. Behind them, that synchronized footfall pursued, never speeding up, never slowing down, just maintaining the same relentless pace. Ivanov suddenly screamed and fell. Kurilov spun around and saw him on the ground, something dark wrapped around his leg like a rope. "Help me!" Ivanov reached toward them. Medvedev lunged back, but Seraph grabbed him. "It's too late." Indeed, the darkness was already spreading up Ivanov's body. His screams grew weaker, then stopped altogether. When he rose to his feet, his face wore that same frozen smile. "Keep running," Kurilov shouted. Ahead, between the trees, lights appeared. Many lights. They'd reached the village. It looked almost normal at first glance. A couple dozen wooden houses, a church with a crooked cross, snow-covered streets. But something was profoundly wrong. There were no real shadows here. The light from the windows didn't behave right, seeming to bend and twist in impossible ways. "Welcome!" A figure emerged from the largest house. A man in old-fashioned clothes, like something from a century ago. "We don't get many visitors. Please, you must be tired. Come, rest." Seraph raised his weapon. "Stay back. Who are you? What is this place?" The man, the village elder, apparently, smiled that same too wide smile. "This is a sanctuary, a place outside time. We've been here for, well, we've lost count of the years." More villagers emerged from the houses. Men, women, even children. All with those same frozen expressions. All moving with that same unnatural gait. "What happened to the expeditions?" Kurilov demanded. "The scientists who came here?" "They're here," the elder said simply. "They're part of us now. As you will be, as everyone who comes here eventually becomes." He gestured, and from the crowd emerged figures wearing modern clothing, research gear, military uniforms from different eras. "We've been here a long time," the elder continued. "Waiting, watching. This place, it has needs, and we serve those needs." "We're leaving," Seraph said flatly. The elder shook his head sadly. "No one leaves. The forest brought you here for a reason. It always does." The villagers began closing in from all sides. Kurilov looked for an escape route, but they were surrounded. The buildings seemed to lean inward, the street narrowing impossibly. "There has to be a way out," Zakharov said, voice tight with panic. "There was," the elder replied. "Before, but not anymore. Not for a very long time. You see this village? It exists between spaces, a fold in reality. We maintain it, feed it, and in return, it keeps us alive, immortal in a way. But that immortality requires sustenance. Souls," Medvedev said quietly. "You're feeding it souls." The elder's smile widened further. "Such an ugly word. We prefer to think of it as incorporation, becoming one with something greater." Seraph's hand moved to his pocket. Kurilov saw him palm something, a small silver object, an Orthodox cross. "Now!" Seraph shouted, and threw the cross directly at the elder. The moment the silver touched him, the elder's form rippled like water. He let out a shriek that sounded like metal tearing. The villagers staggered back, their coordinated movements suddenly chaotic. "Run!" Into the church, Seraph commanded. They sprinted toward the building with the crooked cross. The door hung open, darkness yawning beyond. They plunged inside and slammed it shut. The interior was wrong. The walls were covered in that same backwards writing they'd seen on the old man's icons. The pews were arranged in a spiral pattern, all facing the center where an altar should have been. Instead, there was a hole. A perfect circle of absolute darkness that seemed to pull at their vision, trying to draw them in. "Don't look at it," Seraph warned. But it was too late for Ivanov. He'd entered with them, but now Kurilov saw his face properly in the dim light. His eyes were already turning milky white. "It's beautiful," Ivanov whispered. "Can't you see? We can be part of something eternal." "Snap out of it!" Zakharov slapped him. Ivanov blinked, and for a moment his eyes cleared. "Help me," he pleaded. "I can still feel myself, but it's slipping away. You have to." His body convulsed. When he looked up again, that smile was back. "We need to find another way out," Medvedev said, already searching the shadows. The church had no windows, no back door. Just that central void, and the entrance they'd come through, now blocked by the sound of the villagers gathering outside. Kurilov noticed something on the wall, scratches in the wood. Writing. He moved closer with his flashlight. It was modern Russian, carved desperately into the timber. "They lie. The village feeds on consciousness. It's not a place. It's alive. A parasite that exists by consuming minds. The more aware, the better. That's why they want us. Trained minds, disciplined, full of knowledge and memory." "Who wrote this?" Zakharov asked. Kurilov found a signature at the bottom. Petrov. Date: August 1977. One of the missing scientists. "There's more," Medvedev called from another wall. They gathered around. This message was longer, more frantic. "We tried to leave, made it to the forest, but the village follows. It's not fixed in space. It can move, manifest wherever its prey goes. The only way out is to give it what it wants. A trade, a soul for a soul. But who can make that choice?" The door began to splinter. The villagers were breaking through. "We can't fight them all," Seraph said, "and running clearly doesn't work." He looked at each of them. "One of us needs to stay, voluntarily. Give the village what it wants so the others can escape." "That's insane," Kurilov protested. "We don't even know if that will work. That scientist's message could be lies, planted by the village itself." Seraph shook his head. "It's all we've got. And I'm the ranking officer. It should be me." "No." Medvedev stepped forward. "You need to get back. Report this. I'm the oldest, the closest to retirement anyway. It should be me." Before anyone could argue, he walked toward the void in the center of the church. "Medvedev, don't!" Zakharov started after him, but Medvedev turned with a smile, a real one, not the frozen mask. "Tell my daughter I thought of her at the end. Tell her I went out standing." He stepped into the darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire church shuddered. The villagers outside fell silent. The door stopped splintering. In that moment of stillness, Seraph grabbed both Kurilov and Zakharov. "Now, move!" They burst out of the church. The villagers stood motionless, heads tilted as if listening to something far away. The team didn't wait to see what would happen next. They ran. The village streets twisted and turned. But now they could see the forest edge, and it stayed where it was instead of receding. They were almost out when Zakharov stumbled. Kurilov caught him, but when Zakharov looked up, his eyes had that milky film. "I can feel it," Zakharov whispered. "Medvedev's in there." He's holding it, keeping it busy, but it's fighting him. It wants all of us. He gripped Kurilov's arm. Go. I'll slow you down. I can feel it in my head. It's winning. We're not leaving you, Kurilov said. Zakharov smiled sadly. You don't have a choice. Look. His hand was already becoming translucent, fading into that unnatural darkness. Run. Make it mean something. Serov pulled Kurilov away. We have to go. Now. They ran. Behind them, Kurilov heard Zakharov's voice, calling out to the village, drawing its attention, buying them time. They broke through the tree line. The village behind them began to fade, becoming less substantial, as if it were never quite real to begin with. They ran through the night, branches whipping their faces, until finally the forest began to feel normal again. Real. Alive. Dawn was breaking when they reached the extraction point, the clearing where the helicopter would come. They collapsed in the snow, gasping for air. We made it, Serov said. But he didn't sound relieved. He sounded hollow. Kurilov looked back toward where they'd come from. The forest stood silent and still, innocent, as if nothing had happened. Did we? He asked quietly. Medvedev's gone. Zakharov's gone. Ivanov's gone. And we have no proof. No evidence. Who's going to believe us? Serov pulled out a journal. Petrov's, the one they'd found in the church. We have this, and we have our testimony. It'll have to be enough. They sat in silence, waiting for the helicopter. When it finally appeared, the sound of its rotors was the most beautiful thing Kurilov had ever heard. The flight back was quiet. Serov filled out the initial report. Kurilov stared out the window, watching the endless taiga pass below. Somewhere down there, the village still existed, still waiting, still hungry. Back in Moscow, the debriefing was intense. The officers listened to their story with increasingly skeptical expressions. When they finished, there was a long silence. Gentlemen, the colonel finally said, what you're describing is impossible. Clearly you encountered some kind of isolated community, perhaps with a shared delusion or mass hysteria. As for your missing men, we'll send a proper search team with tracking dogs and aerial support. Don't, Serov said flatly. Don't send anyone else there. The colonel's eyes hardened. That's not your decision to make, Captain. This matter will be investigated properly. You're both being put on medical leave, pending psychological evaluation. That's all. Outside the briefing room, Kurilov lit a cigarette with shaking hands. They're going to send people, he said, and those people won't come back. Serov nodded grimly. I know, but there's nothing we can do. We're just soldiers. We follow orders. 3 weeks later, Kurilov was sitting in his apartment when the phone rang. It was Serov. They sent a team, 20 men, full equipment. They reached the coordinates yesterday. Kurilov's stomach turned to ice. And? Nothing. They found an old abandoned settlement, some collapsed buildings. No signs of recent habitation, no anomalies, no missing expeditions. The team reported it was probably just an old gulag outpost from the Stalin era. Kurilov's hand tightened on the phone. That's impossible. We were there. We saw... I know what we saw, Serov interrupted. But according to the official report, there's nothing there. The case is closed. The missing men are listed as lost in a helicopter crash. Separate incident. Different location entirely. After hanging up, Kurilov walked to his window. Moscow stretched out below, ordinary and real. But he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, in the spaces between what was real and what wasn't, that village still existed, still waited. That night, he had the dream for the first time. He was back in the village. The elder was there, smiling. "You can't escape," the elder said. "You're already part of us. A piece of you stayed behind, and through that piece we can always find you." Kurilov woke in a cold sweat. He went to the bathroom and splashed water on his face. When he looked in the mirror, just for a moment, his reflection didn't move with him. It stood still, watching him. And it was smiling, that too wide smile. He blinked, and it was gone. Just his own exhausted face staring back. But deep down, Kurilov knew the truth. Part of him had stayed in that village. And someday, the village would come to collect the rest. The official report was filed and classified. The case was closed. But in the depths of the Krasnoyarsk territory, in a place that exists in the fold between spaces, a village stands, waiting, always waiting, because that's what it does. That's what it's always done. And it will continue to wait, patient and hungry, for the next souls foolish enough to wander into its embrace. In his Moscow apartment, Kurilov sometimes feels it calling. On quiet nights when the city sleeps, he can almost hear the synchronized footsteps of the villagers, almost see the flickering lights between the trees, almost feel the pull of that dark void at the center of everything. He knows with absolute certainty that one day he'll return, not by choice, but because some part of him never really left, and the village always reclaims what belongs to it, always. That frozen smile haunts his dreams, that too wide grin that stretches beyond human possibility. Sometimes, when he's alone, he catches himself smiling in the mirror, and just for a second, it stretches a little too wide. He tries to ignore it, tries to convince himself it's just trauma, just stress, just the mind playing tricks. But deep down, he knows better. The village is patient. It can wait. It's been waiting for a very long time. And it knows that eventually, everyone comes home. Kurilov crushes another cigarette and stares out at the Moscow skyline. Somewhere out there, beyond the lights and the noise and the crowds, the forest waits. And in that forest, in a place that exists between heartbeats, between thoughts, between one moment and the next, a village stands. Empty streets, dark windows, and in every shadow, frozen smiles. Waiting, always waiting. Because some places don't just exist in space, they exist in possibility, in potential, in the corner of your eye where reality blurs. And once you've seen such a place, once you've walked its streets and looked into its darkness, it never quite lets you go. The last entry in Kurilov's personal journal, written 3 months after the incident, reads simply, "I can feel it closer now, not in space, but in time. The distance is shrinking. Soon there will be no distance at all. And when that moment comes, I'll walk back into the forest. Not because I want to, but because I never really left. None of us did." The journal was found in his apartment. Kurilov himself was never seen again. The official report listed him as having deserted, gone absent without leave. But his colleagues knew better. They knew where he'd gone. Back to the place that had claimed pieces of him. Back to the village that exists in the spaces between. And somewhere in the Krasnoyarsk territory, in a fold of reality that maps can't find and satellites can't see, a village stands. One more house is occupied now. One more light flickers in a window. One more frozen smile joins the eternal congregation. The village has been here for a very long time. It will be here long after we're gone. Patient, hungry, waiting. Because that's what it does. That's all it's ever done. It waits. and eventually everyone who touches it comes home. That's the nature of such places. They're not just locations, they're ideas, possibilities, doorways that, once opened, can never quite be closed again. You can run, you can hide, you can tell yourself it wasn't real, but deep down, you know. And that knowledge is all the village needs, that small seed of certainty, planted deep in your mind. It will grow, slowly, quietly, until one day, you wake up and realize the village isn't out there anymore. It's in here, in your thoughts, in your dreams, in the mirror, when you're not quite looking. And when that realization comes, when you finally understand that the boundary between you and it has dissolved completely, that's when you'll hear the call, clear and undeniable, the sound of synchronized footsteps, the glow of kerosene lamps, the two wide smiles, and you'll go. Not because you have to, but because by then you'll want to. Because the village doesn't just consume, it seduces, it promises an end to loneliness, an end to fear, an end to the exhausting burden of being separate, individual, alone. It offers unity, purpose, eternity. And in the end, who can resist eternity? Who can turn away from the promise of never being alone again? The village knows this. It's known it for as long as it's existed. That's why it's patient. That's why it can afford to wait. Because in the end, they all come home. Every single one. Without exception, without fail, they all come home. And the village, that impossible fold in reality, that hunger given form and consciousness, continues its endless feast, one soul at a time, one smile at a time, forever and ever and ever, until there's nothing left but the forest, the snow, the silence, and in the middle of it all, a village that shouldn't exist, but does, and always will, waiting for the next wanderer, the next lost soul, the next person foolish enough to believe they can escape. Because no one escapes. That's the final truth, the ultimate reality. The village remembers everyone who's ever touched it. And what the village remembers, it eventually reclaims. Not immediately, not obviously, but inevitably. So if you ever find yourself in the deep taiga, in the wild places where maps fail and compasses spin and you see lights flickering between the trees, keep walking. Don't investigate. Don't approach. Don't even acknowledge what you're seeing. Because the moment you do, the moment you turn toward those lights with curiosity or hope or even fear, you've opened the door. And doors, once opened, are very difficult to close, especially when what's on the other side is patient, ancient, and infinitely hungry. The village will wait. It always does. And if not today, if not tomorrow, then someday, you'll find yourself walking toward those lights, drawn by forces you can't name or resist. And when you cross that threshold, when you step from the real world into that fold between spaces, you'll finally understand. You were always going to end up here. From the moment you first saw those lights, your fate was sealed. The village doesn't chase. It doesn't need to. It just waits. Because it knows, with absolute certainty, that everyone it touches eventually comes home. Everyone, without exception, forever and always. Into the frozen smiles and the eternal congregation. Into the darkness that pretends to be light. Into the village that exists in possibility and feeds on certainty. Welcome home. You've been expected. There's a smile waiting for you. A frozen, too wide smile. And once it settles on your face, it will never leave. Because that's what happens in the village. That's what's always happened. and what always will. The circle closes, the pattern completes. Another soul joins the congregation, and somewhere in Moscow, someone else looks at a map of the Krasnoyarsk territory and wonders what secrets the forest holds. Soon, they'll find out. The village is patient. It can wait. It's been waiting for a very, very long time, and it will continue to wait through seasons and years and decades and centuries for the next person to wander into its embrace. Because that's what it does. That's all it's ever done. It waits. It welcomes. It consumes. And it never, ever lets go. The frozen smile is eternal. The congregation is forever. And the village, that impossible fold in reality, continues its endless existence. Feeding, growing, waiting. Always and forever. Waiting for the next soul to come home. And they all do, eventually. Every single one. That's the promise. That's the truth. That's the final, inescapable reality of the village that exists between heartbeats, between thoughts, between one moment and the next. Welcome. You're home now. You've always been coming home. You just didn't know it yet, but the village knew. It always knows. And now that you're here, you'll never leave. No one ever does. No one ever has. No one ever will. The frozen smile spreads across countless faces. The congregation grows by one. And in the forest, in that fold between spaces, the village continues. Patient, eternal, hungry, forever waiting for the next wanderer to come home. Because home is where the village is. And once you've been there, once you've seen it, once you've touched it even for a moment, you carry it with you, in your thoughts, in your dreams, in your reflection when you're not quite looking. And someday, when the distance finally collapses completely, you'll walk back into the forest, back to the place that claimed you the first time you saw its lights, back to the congregation, back to the frozen smile, back home, where you've always belonged, where you'll stay forever. One more face in the crowd, one more smile in the darkness, one more soul in the village's eternal embrace. That's the way it ends. That's the way it always ends. In the forest, in the village, in the frozen smile that never fades, forever and ever and ever, until there's nothing left but the waiting and the hunger and the certainty that the next soul is already on its way. Coming home. Always coming home. Because the village is patient, and the village always wins. Always. Without exception. Forever.